Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are looking at a truly wild piece of ancient source material that is going to completely flip everything you thought you knew about noble ancient warfare right on its head. Today, we're unpacking a shocking ancient perspective on pragmatic, absolutely ruthless warfare. But even more than that, we are going to explore the bizarre, deeply mythological origin story of the target that made these ruthless tactics completely necessary in the first place. Get ready, because we are about to seriously challenge some expectations here. Right off the bat, listen to this decidedly Machiavellian take on duty and war from Krishna. We often have this heavily romanticized expectation that ancient heroes only ever fought fair battles, right? Like charging at each other across an open, sunlit plain. But here, Krishna is openly stating that if you secretly enter an enemy's home and assassinate him, you won't earn obloquy, which is basically an old way of saying disgrace or public shame. It's a remarkably pragmatic admission that sometimes survival requires throwing out the conventional rulebook entirely. So the source material draws a massive contrast between these two approaches. Consider open warfare for a second. Fighting an exceedingly powerful foe directly is actually framed as terrible policy, and either ends in total defeat or, at very best, doubtful results. On the other hand, look at the secret attack. The text uses this vivid imagery. When executed with good policy, a covert strike uproots a massively powerful enemy the exact same way a rushing river effortlessly uproots a tree. The argument here is incredibly compelling. Sometimes ultimate success dictates breaking the rules. Now, what's really interesting about this is the core question it raises. If the enemy is so terrifying that the greatest heroes of the age literally have to bend the rules and plot a secret assassination just to stand a chance, who exactly is he? We're shifting our focus now from the political strategy to the mystery of the target himself, a man whose very existence defies the laws of nature. Section 1. Who is Jarasandha? The target profile. To really understand this target, we first have to look at his lineage, specifically his father, King of Vrihadratha of Magadha. The text describes the king's qualities as literally rivaling the gods. Just to put this in perspective, in glory he was like the sun. His forgiveness was as vast as the earth itself. In wrath, he was like Yama, the destroyer, and his wealth rivaled Vaisravana. This wasn't just your run-of-the-mill king. This was a man whose qualities covered the earth like rays of light. And beyond his personal virtues, he had massive, almost unbelievable military might. The text specifically highlights the number 3. King Vrihadratha commanded 3 akshahunis. Now, an akshahuni is an ancient term for a colossal, almost incomprehensible army of elephants, chariots, cavalry, and infantry. So right away, we are establishing the absolute physical impossibility of a frontal assault against his kingdom. So the crucial point is this. Despite all of this godlike wealth, this totally unmatched military power, and his joyous marriage to the twin daughters of the king of Kashi, King Vrihadratha lacked the one single thing he needed most. His youth was slipping away without a son to perpetuate his line. He performed every auspicious rite, every sacrifice, every ritual you could think of, but every single attempt failed. And remember, he had promised his twin wives absolutely equal love, but he couldn't give either of them a child. Section 2. A king's despair, seeking an heir. The sheer depth of the king's despair here is staggering. Listen to this. Forsaking my kingdom, I am about to go into the woods to practice ascetic penances. I am very unfortunate, for I have no son. He was literally ready to throw away a godlike empire, an empire guarded by 3 massive armies, all because of his childlessness. Honestly, what good is ruling the entire world if you have no one to leave it to? Well, years pass, and his youth is fading fast. But then, one day, the king catches word that a famous ascetic sage, the high-souled Muni Chanda-kausika, is resting under a mango tree right in his capital. The king rushes out there with his wives, offering him valuable jewels. The sage is pleased. He offers the king a boon, a magical wish. But the king, choked up with tears, actually rejects the standard boon. He tells the sage basically, "Don't bother. I'm abandoning my kingdom anyway, because I don't have a son." Which brings us to Section 3, the magic mango, a fateful choice. The sage listens, enters a state of deep meditation, and out of nowhere, a juicy, untouched mango drops right into his lap. He takes this specific fruit, mentally pronounces some magical mantras over it, and hands it directly to the king. The sage explicitly states that this single fruit is the key to obtaining an incomparable offspring. He tells him, "Your wish is fulfilled, go on back home." It's a completely direct, magical solution to the king's lifelong despair. And this brilliantly illustrates the tragic clash between a magical prescription and political promises. The sage's intent was crystal clear: one fruit to produce one incomparable child. However, the king suddenly remembers that secret vow he made years ago to love his twin wives equally and show absolutely no preference. So, trying to be a good and fair husband, he takes this single magic mango and splits it perfectly in half, giving one piece to each queen. Both queens eat their half, and because of the sage's absolute magical truthfulness, they both conceive. But when the time comes to give birth, the result is incredibly macabre. Each queen brings forth a fragmentary body, literally exactly half of a child. One eye, one arm, one leg, half a stomach, half a face. It's a completely horrifying biological outcome. Section 4. Forged by a demoness. The accidental weapon. The absolutely terrified mothers have their midwives wrap these lifeless fragments up, sneak out the back door, and just throw them away at a local crossing in the dead of night. But at that crossing, an opportunistic creature happens to be lurking: a Rakshasa. According to the text, a Rakshasa is a being that lives upon flesh and blood, in this case a female cannibal named Jara. She stumbles upon these abandoned fleshy fragments in the dark, injecting a very real element of dark fantasy into our narrative. Let's move to and see how this builds. Jara finds the two lifeless halves. She immediately wants to carry them away for a snack, but carrying two separate, slippery, bloody fragments is super clumsy. So, impelled by fate, she simply presses them together to make them easier to hold. And boom. The moment the two magical halves touch, they instantly fuse together into a sturdy living child of one body. He is literally forged together by a demoness, out of pure convenience. And because she put him together, he later becomes known as Jarasandha, which literally means joined by Jara. But this wasn't just a normal baby waking up. This newborn was a biological tank. His body instantly became as hard and strong as a thunderbolt. He shoved his copper-red fists into his mouth and just began to roar terribly, like rain-charged thunderclouds. In fact, his sheer physical density and power were so overwhelming that Jara, this supernatural cannibalistic demoness, found herself completely unable to even lift or carry the infant away. The child's terrible roars were so insanely loud, they actually drew the king and the disappointed queens rushing out of the palace. Jara, completely enveloped in wonder at this child's impossible strength, decided she couldn't possibly eat him. So, assuming a beautiful, golden-complexioned human form, she held the child and told the king, "It behoveth not me, therefore, to kill the infant child of such an illustrious and virtuous monarch." She hands the fused child back to his parents, claiming she had protected him. The queens drenched the baby in milk, and the king was absolutely overjoyed. And that brings us right back full circle to the very beginning of our explainer. Jarasandha grows up to be that invincible enemy we discussed earlier. Think about it. How do you fight a war against an enemy whose very biology is a magical fusion of fate, despair, and a demon's touch? You certainly can't fight him on an open battlefield. His body is a literal thunderbolt, accidentally assembled by a Rakshasa. This is exactly why Krishna argued that open warfare was doomed to fail, and why a secret Machiavellian assassination was the only logical policy left. It leaves you wondering, when the enemy is a literal, impossible force of nature, are there really any rules of war left to break? Think about that, and thank you so much for exploring this fascinating ancient text with me today.